And whether it's ECPM or return on ad spend, depending on where you're measuring this, it's eliminate waste and try to make money simultaneously. So increase revenue, reduce cost simultaneously.
Is the old school? Did I do something? I was trying to record it. I hit something.
That's all right. So you've probably seen these sort of chaos diagrams where the brand has at least 4 agencies or 4 services, whether they're technology companies, trading desks, agencies. They've got somebody helping them with direct marketing, mail, voice, email. Possibly doing retargeting. You've got an email service provider that might be working with them or might not. That's maybe your internal team is doing database marketing or email. The digital agency, the linear agency, the brand agency, media buying agency. So we call it, your problem is the data is all over the place. And we were talking before, about the bank. You paid for that data. That data's conceptually yours. It's just that you don't have the ability to retrieve it, get it, and sort of get it back into a single source and make it relate to your other data. So this is a problem, obviously, because as a consumer, if a bank is trying to conquest me from my bank, they have no idea what I'm seeing on different channels and what message I'm seeing at all. And the basic cases that we had discussed before are suppression of people that are not in my target, frequency and day parting, or those separately, and then the full funnel journey mapping of how we make money. And when you think about that from a technology standpoint, you've got many data sources. I was at a conference, and I think the McCormick CPG company, I think $10–12 billion, global, 200 offices, 15 agencies. They were on like a 5 or 7 year journey. They had brought together in their data like 600 data sources and counting, and I think they were like halfway there of the data that they thought they needed to bring in from all the consumer touch points, that the place where your customers and prospects can touch the company, to produce a single method of looking at, mining, and improving and making more efficient those connections. The CDP brain, if you think about Amazon, Google, and just the way that the search business works, the center of that company is those algorithms, the way that they crawl and rationalize the web and relate it to humanity. It's aspirational to say that you're going to be like that, but that's sort of what you're looking for, is the secret formula. We talked about most of this. What's the difference of the CDP? The DMP, and you've heard it a number of times say it's part of this stack, or it relates to the CDP, but it's one of many things that can relate to the CDP. And this is completely oversimplified, and the math does not work with, for the statisticians, the math doesn't work with but if this is a very simple sort of like, oh, I dropped mail, then I sent email, then a mobile message, and then I had a number of display events, then I finally got a click, and I sent another email, and then I got a take. Imagine that times 100, though, or times many more channels and many more campaigns. You're going to be able to score these populations in a number of formula or a formula across this data stack to figure out a method for how do I get awareness on a multi-channel level? How do I get interest on a multi-channel level? How do those relate to one another statistically? And so on and so forth down the funnel, so that you're shaving off the inefficient parts of spend and you are increasing the velocity and the value of advertising.
So let me interject and play devil's advocate. There was a famous question in a famous video at the Recode conference, if you guys know that great trade publication from Kara Swisher and crew. 5 years ago, there was a CEO of Machine Zone who was one of the early DR publishers / brands and blew the doors off of, it's a historically relevant because it was kind of one of the first times a lot of traditional publishers and brands went, this guy is the future and he's freaking me out and pissing me off in a way because he's basically trashing brand awareness advertising. And someone that has been a very senior person in our industry for 30 years talked about, where's the art? I mean, what happened to the fact that you're supposed to move people in the emotion? That I don't see any of that here, Paul.
Yeah, I think that this goes back, well, it's two things.
This isn't
One is
planned, by the way, so I can tell this is totally happening.
I mean, does anybody here know what kind of car they're going to own in 10 years? Yes? What is it? You like what?
Porsche.
So it's going to be a Porsche. So you're a Porsche intender, and we're all Porsche intenders, I think, on some level. But so the part of it is that the awareness is, it is not purely creative, but we're putting like a new circle in here, which is the message, which can be machine learned and can be dynamically, creatively aimed using all this data. And it can contain, like at Merkle, we were doing these 9-box multivariate testing of bundles for like Dish and all at telecom and financial services. And the messages are different for different segments. But the core sort of delight, especially in video, is, I'm sort of a geek that thinks creative agencies will always be around. They will always be around. Whether they're able to chop their world up into attributes and elements and figure out how to manage all those assets and make them come together like a dynamic video, I'm not sure. Probably not for a while, but
maybe there's some sports analogies around, Moneyball and the gut of managing a game or managing people or giving messages. Maybe there's some analogy there around you still need that a little bit as an element, but boy, you could use a lot more help with all this to do a more effective job, right?
Yeah. And we're certainly guilty as just internet technologists as an industry of over-engineering things. I mean, we do all this stuff. I mean, think about the retargeting business that you were talking about before, and think about the result. I mean, you could have cured a major disease with that computing and all that thought and all that effort, and we're stalking people with ads. So
Yeah.
not to get too philosophical, but I'm thinking about analogies and adjacencies, and just to put this in perspective, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but the heritage of how large industries, where each business formed individually and they rallied around some kind of standard, is pretty well worn. I mean, we talked about ERP and EDI and UPC. We've got blockchain and cryptocurrency coming up, and I referenced the DTC and the DTCC, which are the Direct Trade Clearing Commission, which is all the brokerages and banks in the 60s. They all had people running around with all the clearing certificates like messengers all over the place. Terribly inefficient. They were different forms. There was errors, and it really hampered the volume of the stock exchanges. So the DTC is a consortium, and then it merged with another one, I think, that was like a VHS Betamax kind of thing. And so a consortium that's owned by all the exchanges is now central. It's the central dictionary and keeper of how things are done from one side of the exchange to the other. And as you look at ad tech, and I know you've probably heard the financial analogies of the stock, I'm the Bloomberg of whatever. I think we even said it at Brillig at one point. But the dark pools that exist and the machine trading, the high frequency trading platforms and the hedge funds and the people that have a secret formula for selling and a secret formula for buying. And those two analytical methods do battle with each other with no human interaction inside of these highly standardized, forms like the DTC and the exchanges. And obviously it's scalable, right? So the other grand sort of thing that we're seeing is, this is that Chief Martech diagram with 8,000 logos on it. So chiefmartech.com, they sort of one up the Lumascape.
Yeah, we got a reference to them later. Yep. Scott Brinker, great group.
If we see where the puck is going, and this is not to belittle our technology, but there's a $250 billion software industry out there called ERP. And this is what runs companies all around the world is Oracle, is SAP, is NetSuite, is Salesforce. This is where they're heading. And I'm not saying that Adobe won't become an ERP. That could happen as well. But it looks like EdTech, MadTech is going to get absorbed by the large computing industry and be enterprise and be standardized. And it's going to be different for Fortune 500 versus Russell 20,000 or whatever. And I referenced some of the sort of foundational changes in technology that are going on. We talked about Hadoop, which is sort of distributed data, the ability to store, hundreds of petabytes, your whole company's data, every touch point, never forget a thing. There's another technology that's emerged in the last 5 years called Kubernetes, which is sort of the dream of application developers forever, which is that code in a standardized container, the services in that code can run somewhere else in a completely different environment. That's really oversimplifying, and I put a little diagram there of how it works.
So to get from here to there, do buyers and sellers need to ask their CDP potential partners, where are you in these areas?
Yeah, you could
say
say
today to the day-to-day to help NASDAQ sell more and more valuable ads.
Yeah, you can
And
look for
eventually
Hadoop and
them,
Spark
right?
on their roadmap,
Yeah.
and you can see if Kubernetes is on the roadmap. Because if you're manually integrating yourself with your industry as opposed to joining one of these Kubernetes standard container approaches, you're not going to probably be able to be competitive because you're going to spend all your time integrating, which is what our industry does. I think for Brillig, it was probably 90% of our corporate energy and our capital went into hooking ourselves to ad tech, integrating into the 50 buy side and sell side platforms that everybody else has integrated with. It had to be done, but it's tremendously wasteful. 5G, everybody knows about. It's 100 times increase in the network speed, which means that I don't think we can understand the applications that are going to be built on 5G. Just better stream Netflix is that's not the killer app.
No, it means that the real-time data-driven storytelling and the message being personalized as you're walking down the street is pretty real. There isn't a 15 stations and, we didn't have time and they already walked by. It's essentially right there.
Right. And the way that companies like Akamai are creating caching layers that are closer and closer to the edge of the network, and with 5G, the applications are going to be more powerful. Like blockchain, which is a killer app for currency, is not a killer app for advertising because our transaction volume is too high. Whatever, 100 million a second or whatever it is, it can do 10,000 a second.
Yeah.
But the son of blockchain or daughter of blockchain might be different. So how that gets done, I think this is maybe even another generation, but this is where we think things are headed. AR, VR, and wearables and Internet of Things, all this data that's thrown off is it's sometimes more important than the data that the user's throwing off. A friend of mine started a company, it was based on copier recharges and refills and what you can do to make more money as a copier company. And all they did was study who uses the copier, looking at the IP address data of the people using it and the client and the server, not even the internet. And they developed an email campaign around that, and they adjusted their email, and I think it resulted in $100 million in sales moving from one place to another. And we talk a lot about AI and machine learning. This is sort of a...
This is the one slide, right? This is all they need to know right
Yeah.
here. If they can get to this, they're all set, right, TD?
And this is like a...
Done, 6 months, we're there. That's the North Star.
This is this is the final state, I think, of a client that we're looking at these stages of how do you move from where you are now to a CDP. And we tried to imagine what all was hooked to it and what the data flows might look like. So we're not going to present this, but it'll be in the deck. So finishing up here is, there's sort of two ways you can do this. One is the big companies like Adobe have their CDPs. They've like we've been saying, we've been building CDPs for 10 years. Just we've been building it pieces and calling it this, that, and the other thing. And now Adobe and the bigger software companies are pulling it together. And then there's a whole bunch of boutique companies that have like a piece of it that might be the centerpiece or whatnot, sort of boutique. So it's really, it's the old, you're gonna buy it or you're gonna build it with some kind of a kit. Because most of the software is open source. So if you have wizards in your company, they can take all the open source pieces. There's open source statistical machine learning software, reporting, data visualization, modeling, and all the Spark and Hadoop stuff is open source. Now, making it stand up professionally in a large company is a whole other deal.
Well, another debate and why we still, say brand/agencies is we're not going to ask Horizon for a proprietary roadmap here, but the constant 25-year struggle of agencies owning tech has been debated, and you've seen pros and cons and successes and failures for a while on that now. There's another hour discussion we could have around agencies leveraging the same assets that we used to have at BBDO with our big spend, senior relationships, and sexy brands and a lot of money going into an upfront, and all together, that's why you want to be a part. One of the reasons you want to be part of BBDO is because we're at the table and we're moving publishers to give up inventory and access, and we can do this because we're able to move all this at once at 2 in the morning on a Thursday. We think there's a similar story with agencies around data in a post-Axis world, where the army of second-party data that agencies could have with all of their clients. You can imagine, Steve, the knowledge of the clients we were just reminiscing about: Pepsi, Delta, Chrysler, Visa, FedEx, GE, HBO. Just HBO and Pizza Hut alone. There's your second-party data story right there. That's Netflix and chill, right? Without the part of the chill. So the eating one. So so imagine agencies doing that and saying, we're going to have our own CDP, and we're actually going to go after and aggregate PR agencies, and we're going to aggregate email agencies and social agencies, and just that's going to be us. The CDP is the core asset. So we think there's a future where we're flirting with one of the holding companies that, after acquiring a data company for several $1 billion, is now realizing, okay, maybe we should do something with it. So we'll see.
Right, and the next few slides, which again, I'm not going to go through all this text, but we laid out sort of a schematic of, how would you RFP one of these things? What are the steps? What are the deliverables? How long should it take to get, if you remember those steps of I'm going to glue my, my retargeting system to a programmatic advertising system to a DCO to the next channel, the next channel, the next channel. The first one was if you're going to outsource. The second one is if you're going to, do it with a partner or do it yourself in some kind of a kit. This is, another rendering of like activation from left to right of a journey map.
But we also left it in there because the source, March 2018 seems like an eternity ago. And that was kind of future state then, and we're already 22 months later, and this is still starting point for a lot of people. So it was meant to be a little bit of perspective also around what the future means for the whole industry and organizationally, and understanding that we got some glaciers involved here.
Amen.
Yeah.
3 to 4 months actually sounds like short to me for what we're talking about here now.
Yes, I mean, that's,
Chunking out certain phases for sure.
Okay.
Not the, giant flowchart family circus, arrows going everywhere. Sorry, old.
that's to get going.
comic strip.
Just to like.
Yeah, like proof of
Let's get
concept.
your use case going and get a win. Yeah,
3 to 4 months.
90 to 120 days, we've done that with some folks, yeah.
Right,
Where
right.
people ring the bell next quarter and like, oh, next season, boy, we're ready now to do this with 4 other brands.
Because we advocate sort of an agile approach to building one of these things. Because the first, you might get either a software that doesn't work or the way that you implement it doesn't work. And just like the ERP market the road is littered with casualties of people that bought SAP for $10 million and IBM charged them another $20 million to install it. And 3 years later, 3 CTOs later, they still don't have an ERP system. Because this is like an extension or a new central nervous system or whatever medical analogy you want to use. That's why starting small with a select group of people, like almost a skunk works, is a good approach. This is again the conceptualized loop between 2 environments, 2 data environments, or a media environment and an analytics environment, segmentation and media. Spend enough time on that. And this is just another rendering of where we think it's going. The 2000s were about silos, and now we've been climbing up towards programmatic. We think that the end state is sort of real-time decisioning, that you're going to hopefully be in companies that are sort of, woke, data woke, whatever, that are, instead of, the way we operate now is we sort of experience business, we're in the dark and we have a flashlight, we're sort of looking around, and everything else we're looking at reports that are in the past, sort of rear view mirror, as opposed to having sort of advanced sonar, radar, looking ahead, running over our competitors because they're still in the dark.
So this is the fun IoT future state example here before we get to Angie. So there it is. So at CES this year, Sharman, I think I can play the video. Sharman announced something called the VIP, PEE, with a personalized porta potty. Did anybody see this? This is new to you? All right, cool. So insert plenty of jokes, but also we'll talk about the seriousness even for a CPG brand that you never think of as first-party data or anything else. And this is where we could go on this. Please audio work. Killing me.
Yeah, the audio slider looked like it was all the way down. That's
Killing me, still. Okay, I'll do a little voiceover as we say in the TV business. Yeah, so this isn't a spoof. This is what they actually showed. And the concept, they had a few things. They had a robot that would actually go and get toilet paper out of the closet for you when you're on the toilet and your spouse didn't refill. That's real. We have the porta potty experience where there are these types of, insert the joke about, do you really want to be spending more time in there, right? But being able to, frankly, have a destination. A lot of us, we work with a lot of out-of-home companies and build. We've helped establish first revenue on screens in taxis and soon to be Ubers and a lot of other places taking advantage of new space. And there have been several trials where you've seen, well, men have seen screens, above the urinals. So, someone's attention is precious and special in that environment, maybe really precious and sensitive and special. But, imagine, again, having some of these devices and imagine
Sharman, who normally just runs a TV ad and with a cuddly bear, and then tries to see the data from Catalina or whatever and how it moved off the shelf, and that's their cause and effect. I mean, when everything is tagged, P&G and Sharman's going to know when you're down to that part of the roll, and they're going to signal back better than Alexa. That's part of, obviously, Alexa's play. With Amazon to have it auto-ordered and shipped back. We've been talking about this for 20 years. I worked for a company called the Internet Appliance Network in 1999, where we thought, hey, maybe the refrigerator will be smart enough, we think, to know when the milk is going to be out, and it'll just order the milk and put it. Some of us are almost kind of there. This is, a wild example of that. But it's also CPG companies becoming real owners of first-party data and the Internet of Things. We were in Cannes 3 years ago at a digital out-of-home thing, talking with the head at IPG and a couple others, and just kind of talking about some out there stuff. You guys have seen digital clothing, right? I don't know if you've worn it or whatever, but the fabric is digitized. So, I asked a question about, this is before the NBA put the patches on here. But I said, imagine if you could actually digitally track all of the sponsorship automatically, knowing screen time and in-stadium actual attention time to the logo in real time, and how many times that logo was seen in positive plays and negative, and score all that, and understanding that we are our own first party, right? Kind of the ultimate that we've already talked about. So some futuristic stuff, and imagine then being able to loop that intel back in as a marketer and go, wow, if I could actually measure and attribute that way, or I could actually refill or know appropriately when folks are okay with it because they see the actual benefit. It doesn't get as scary when you save someone's butt by having the 12-pack of toilet paper show up that next day for your spouse because you're out of town, you're down on the next roll and you don't have time, and real issues at home, right? So with that, I thought that would be a fun way to lead into Angie, because she's wonderful at trashing a lot of stuff anyway, and calling bullshit on things. And so I thought, why not give the best example of out there for her to roll her eyes at. So Angie, you've already heard from a few times, fortunately. We're going to do a set change here, which is called me dragging this chair. And dragging the other chair, we're going to go right there. So I've been lucky enough to know Angie about, 20 years? 22? 24, 1996, yeah. So check out the LinkedIn below the photo, it's impressive. Most recently, and where we're going to spend a lot of the rest of this time here together, will be about her last 2 gigs, where she happens to be the third person you've heard from today that was at Merkle Dentsu, but had a great run there, and then went in-house brand side at Morgan Stanley. And so wanted to start, tell us about the experiences at Merkle and kind of what led you to Morgan Stanley, and some of the, aside from, typical agency, big holding company dynamics and all that fun stuff, the job and the opportunity, what you were doing at Merkle, and then how that was applied to what you're doing at Morgan Stanley.
So originally, prior to Merkle, I was at Dentsu and I managed all of the ad operations there, digital ad operation, and went from Cara to and grew to Dentsu, Aegis Media, and then Dentsu. So kind of the 3 phases within a very, very short period of time. And was managing over 30 brands on the Dentsu side. However, what was interesting about Merkle when they approached me was, at Dentsu, we just started up Amnet. I had worked with our chief media officer on figuring out what is programmatic. Is that something that we at Dentsu should be investing in and developing a discipline around? Yeah, obvious answer is yeah. But Merkle had a really interesting value prop, right? So an offering was that their business was primarily based on CRM, and with the technology of Brillig, but their what they called data source, which was their proprietary database of pretty much mapping individuals throughout the U.S. 18 and above. with multiple records, email addresses, physical addresses.
Yeah, and this
and all
wasn't
that.
3 months ago. This was,
Right.
how long ago had they
This
been
is
doing this?
So they've been in business for, what is it, 30 years, Merkel? So they started off,
Yeah.
right, 30.
Whatever, 19, when
Yeah.
you got out of college.
Yeah, so that whole slide Paul was talking about, the direct mail world, if you think you're worried about with digital people, you have no idea the data has been traded and nobody seems to care because, you know, the harm seems to be just quote unquote junk mail that I can recycle.
Right.
And that doesn't feel as damaging as who's watching me and invading me because it happens so much more personally and quicker.
But
They
they,
made their phone send the AOL discs for $10
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were appending a lot of the records, like your physical addresses and your phone numbers, with additional insights in terms of how many kids you have, if you own or buy a home, own or rent, yeah, what kind of car you drive, to various types of stuff. So once digital became something that was more concrete, they had started to hire people with more of a digital background and said, you know what, there's something about programmatic in which we can connect, you know, this database to a digital ID. So that's kind of how they started, and that intrigued me, right? I actually have, you know, a media background as well, so I had managed lots of media campaigns for a lot of clients, especially in a direct response perspective, Delta Airlines, Marriott, General Mills, and so was working with a lot of CRM databases, customer data, and trying to retarget them on the digital side. So having said that, you know, oftentimes you have different browsers. For me, I've got 5 different email addresses that I use interchangeably.
That was at the classic, oh, my hotmail's for spam.
Yeah. Well, even like with Gmail, I've got like 4 aliases.
Now, is that because you are a marketing wonk like us and you want to see what the different identities and profiles and how you...
No, one's for shopping, one's for spam. In fact, one's called spam mail.
You don't have spammail@gmail.com.
I have spammail.ang@gmail.com.
Wow. Oh, that's right. You do the name.ang.
Right. I have a personal email address, and then I have one just specifically for engaging with colleagues in the industry.
Yeah. So not to go too far off track, but one of the other futuristic things we were going to talk about, we were going to throw in, and we were like, all right, we're not going to have time, is multiple identities for each of us. So email, which is something that we're working on industry-wide that we, again, teased out could be a hook. Deterministically, it is often in other places. I mean, I have a personal identity with prohaska@gmail.com, and I have a work identity at Matt at Prohaska Consulting. So to be able to talk to me, the same person I am, kind of, and we are a little different, right?
And then your different devices.
That's right.
Right. So that was what was interesting. So they recruited me over, and it was really great where I got to learn, you know, help build out a people-based marketing approach and apply it to media campaigns, and really work with clients to help them understand how different types of data that is appended to your audiences you can actually use. So as a good example, one of the things that we had said to a car company was that, hey, you know, we know for a fact that typically customers will look at buying a new car every 6 years, right? So given facts, right? So 6 years, 6 years, they're going to start looking for a new car. And so therefore we can, you know, look at the database and say, how many people have actually purchased a Cadillac in the last 6 years? So if you're Ford, right, how do you know, we should actually try and target those people who have Cadillacs and buy our car. So you can start creating different lookalike models, and so forth. For
a conquesting strategy.
Yeah, for retail clients, we were looking at, like, for one of our, it was for a retailer of supplies. There's really one right now, but at the time there were many.
Yeah.
And so they wanted it back to school targeting, right? So we looked at their database of what was their customer database of school supply shoppers. So let's now append that data, look at different DMAs, look at it down to the zip code level, and target people within their area that have the same number of kids and most likely will be purchasing based on when school opens, right? Because we knew that regionally. That was another thing. That we did.
So we always, you've heard us give the spiel of everything is in a framework of tech targets and talent. So let's break a little of that because
Okay.
we've got a couple of use cases you've already nicely thrown out about. So with all due respect to the folks who are not physically here, but will get this recording, and I think one of their teammates on the West Coast is on the Zoom right now, and again, who have great logo presence here. You have been a customer of theirs before in your past, so not just about them, but talking about the tech in general. Where do you see the arc of kind of leading innovation and that classic point solution versus the enterprise grand dream, and how's that being pieced together? Because everybody's roadmaps are all over the place, right?
I think it's still in Band-Aid mode.
Well, Band-Aid mode makes it sound like you're fixing things. You mean like trying to plug holes and
Well, I think both.
save stuff to be able to go, oh yeah, we can do that?
I think a combination of both, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's, I think a lot of companies are trying to take on more than they can without having the proper staff or support or people that can help them build out those capabilities.
So it's the classic in a world, even when it moves to self-service, having the bat phone.
Yeah.
And people who can tell you how the heck to get something.
Yeah, and I think that,
helps, yeah.
and I think that, like, for example, Google, when I was growing up with them, we had TAMs, right? So you could call up someone and you can say, hey, I'm having a problem with the ads. I don't know how to traffic this. I'm having issues. Now it's submit a ticket. And
TAMs are for those.
technical account manager.
Very good.
So,
Human
and then
beings on the other side.
and it's in a nice little chat room environment, or it's via email and you don't get a response till 24, 48 hours, right? Or things are in, like in DBM, it's, you send something into QA and you get back a response, hey, your ad has been declined because of these reasons, but the reasons don't make sense and you can't call anybody.
So CDP customer service might still be needed.
I think
Okay.
so.
Got
I think that what a lot of the big tech companies are not seeing is that they're trying to bring a lot of clients into a self-service model and get rid of a truly good support system. And so what's happening is there are a lot of marketers and agency people who don't fully understand the capabilities. And so they're actually teaching each other within their own teams how to use it. And oftentimes, or not oftentimes, but sometimes, the people that they're learning from don't necessarily really know how things should be set up. So I've had many clients who their data layer was such a mess because of their predecessor.
Blind leading blind. Yeah.
And blind leading blind. So, having to help them and consult them on how to organize the data or even how to look at data is I think, one of the things that a lot of marketers don't have time to do, right? So my experience with a lot of marketers, I've worked with over 200 marketers or 200 brands, about 80 big companies, and their teams are small. So the tech team is separate from the analytics team. They're not communicating with one another on the brand side. There's only 2 or 3 people that are really managing the brand. So, and then you have a lot of people transitioning onto different business lines, so not a lot of stuff is actually covered.
So a lot of this is validating the whole day that you guys have heard, obviously, and some common themes. I forgot to predicate the reason it says with Matt Prohaski and you is it made it to sound like a shampoo ad or something like that, but it's Fireside is us. So there's a special 8 points that could make the difference with first, second, or third place. Whoever asked Angie the first question, otherwise, she and I could go till about 9:30. But we're going to go probably another 10, 15 minutes here, since again we've already nicely had her for a lot of today. So let's talk about the Morgan Stanley experience a little bit, because we know it wasn't a 12-year run there, but certainly you and our good friend Walt, did try to get some good momentum going, and tell us about the goal without breaking But give us some of the spirit of the two of you going in and what the intent was and what was kind of at the top of your to-do list for the next 2 years.
Yeah, so the idea, so they initially, they hired me for the analytics role, to lead their analytics, and really wanted to understand attribution, consumer journey, and it was more focused around branding and lifting the brand and amplifying our content so that we were targeting high net worth individuals and opinion influencers.
Top of the funnel.
Yeah,
but
very top.
A lot of things we talked about today, like, gee, you should be doing this.
Yeah, okay. and allowing the financial advisors to actually close the deal.
Yeah, then go ahead and do their thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But so they're like, well, we need someone to actually help us really understand the data. We're very MarTech heavy, and we don't understand the effects that digital media or even just advertising in general has to our brand. Like, is it helping with awareness? Is it actually, the content that we're delivering, are we actually getting more customers because of it? And I think the challenge that I had was that it was very siloed, right? So I was hired to be analytics, so I wasn't really in a position to really dictate how media campaigns should be set up. They were still reliant on Adobe, right? So they're very Adobe stack. I mean, they're all into the Adobe stack, and rightfully so, very content driven. However, when it came to the ad tech data, they did not actually want it to be married.
Morgan Stanley.
I think it was just a lack of understanding of why is there a difference between ad tech data and MarTech data, right? So double-click floodlight tags, their attribution and their methodology or any other ad server is very different from an Omniture or Adobe Analytics methodology, right? One is, to me, if you don't have an integration with your ad server and that impression data is not coming in through and you're not mapping the audiences, exposing those audiences, you're not really seeing the full attribution, right? So it's all based on clickstream data, it's based on visitation, it's based on codes that are being passed through in the URL or in certain parameters, where your ad servers are based on cookies or back-end mapping of IDs, right? So
you can tell she's an ops woman.
So I think that has been the challenge of, like, why is Google saying that, 40% of the people are coming from paid social, but when you actually look at the traffic, it's only 20%, right? Are they more engaged? Are they not? And then what creatives are working well? The other thing was, I think we were doing a lot more direct buys before I came on. And so trying to move them into a more programmatic mindset where you can actually spend more efficiently and effectively by using data, audience data, to target individuals and minimize the waste and move them over to more private marketplace deals. That was also something that was a bit of a challenge because the publishers would go back to our CMO and go, no, you're not spending as much. And you should be spending $4 or $5 million with us.
That's how they approach you, Steve, right?
Right. And we could do this big sponsorship and so forth. But when you look at the actual data, duplication, audience overlap, latency, assisted conversion, you really do need to be able to target effectively, hone in on your audience, and leverage and take the wasted dollars and move it to more effective channels. I remember at Dentsu, we were running on a lot of travel sites, and the overlap on travel sites were huge, right? So 60% and 60% overlap, and the CPMs were different. So I said to the team, I was like, so if there's a 60 and a 60% overlap, you can pretty much take all your dollars and move it to the site that is most efficient. Because you're going to reach the same audience with possibly a loss of maybe 5 or 10.
Yeah, the Venn diagram overlap was
right.
Pretty thick, yeah.
So I think that a lot of clients don't ask the right questions either. There's tons of data on the ad tech side that is comparable to the MarTech data. Most agencies are pulling standard ad server reports, standard programmatic reports, and they're really not looking at the additional data sets that are available on the platforms. So cross-environment reporting, assisted, unassisted, geo.
So since you were in one for a little while and got a couple of friends here at some pretty good ones now, I mean, is that just a teaching moment? Is that a time we're being too stretched because the client grinds us down and I'm the one analyst now working on 8 plans and I want to do that, but I'd like to sleep a couple hours as well?
I think it's definitely, I think the agencies don't work hard enough to educate clients on what available data sets there are, but what are the staffing and the resources that they need to actually do this work. So especially when programmatic and social came out, they're like, well, I'm spending X million dollars. It's the same money, same budget I've had for the last 2 or 3 years. Why do I need to increase your fee? Well, the reason why is because there's different platforms, different experts. Talent is more expensive. And so therefore, if you're not willing to pay us for it, unfortunately, we're going to give you a B team, not an A team. So and oftentimes that is the case on the agency side.
And that's the ironic race to the bottom that a lot of people have quipped that RTV real-time bidding, race to the bottom, haha. The guy who made that joke was my old boss at AOL. He was the one that started that because he used to run an ad network and he was completely threatened by programmatic, obviously, because it disrupted and ultimately killed.
Yeah, we loved it because we're like, oh, we're in control.
Right. But the
I will no longer be on Playboy.com.
Yeah, but the irony is that if you move to complete audience and the way it was oversold and inappropriately sold, it seemed we saw too often from agencies to client is that efficiency only meant cheap CPM. And it's a little bit of, you get what you pay for, and then that's the race to the bottom because, oh, we can make more margin by not needing to staff, we can just run open auction all day long and blah, 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 and then nobody looks downstream as much, and you get tagged and bagged with attribution measurement issues, and a lot of.
Yeah, and I think a lot of clients also look at it and say, well, I'm hiring you to run media, so I want to pay for staff on the media team. So analytics and ad ops, especially ad ops, were either not budgeted correctly, and therefore you would have one person who was maybe allocated 25% to analyze a $20 million media campaign. And then you had a 10% ad ops person trafficking 1,600 campaigns in one quarter. Or not 1,600, but so there's a lot.
It looks like someone either wants to rebut or just nod and quietly move on to the next one, or.
I think because CDP is so new, you can't find talent, right? You always have to have people volunteer to do more than expected. And a lot of the data that's in the CDP is clients' first-party data. This is really how they're willing they are to give access to kind of prove value of what the insights should be.
Yeah, and they're
executing it well too.
And certain types of clients, like financial services and insurance companies, they're structured from a federal perspective, as well as within the walls of the organization, to not share customer data, right? So again, in the financial industry, wealth management is not allowed to share data with the investment manager. So we have no idea, and then I'm coming from firm Y. We have because of federal regulations, we can't marry up these things. So for financial services and insurance companies, I think there's probably ways. Right, there's a few that there's just additional steps that they need to take.
But for most traditional categories, I mean, we're still only 3 years removed, which isn't a lot culturally, around the pendulum swing of trust between brands and agencies. I mean, Steve knows very well that our firm was proud to be a finalist for the A&A white paper and report that came out in 2016 that eventually Ubiquity and the Skunkworks security team, K2, went around and started knocking on doors and put out a pretty scathing report. And so, there's still a little of that trust that hasn't been perfected yet back with every agency, with every brand. And so then when you're talking about first-party data in a not really recently post-Axis world, not completely yet anyway, but they're still operating. We know the CEO, nice guy. But that dynamic of no, trust us again, and we're gonna use this for you first, second, and everybody will win. There aren't a lot of those pitches happening.
Yeah.
Chats, right?
I think that I don't personally think that a lot of agencies were maliciously trying to see clients on the transparency side, right? Yeah. They did put language in our contracts that said, hey, I was explaining in one organization, it was, moving into programmatic, there's platform fees and management fees. If the clients don't ask, well, what does that mean? Who gets the management fee?
Yeah.
And what percentage of the management fee are you getting?
Exactly. 8 points going right here. Yes.
So having worked on all of those agency kind of contracts, including Merkle, I am working in e-commerce with other agencies. When you acquire companies that are similar to Merkle or other sort of tech companies that when you want to become a one-stop shop, it becomes very difficult to be able to propose to your clients what sort of opportunities you will get with these new entities. It's a whole company solution to the extent that you became a part of a larger organization. What advice would you have given a larger organization to streamline the process to make it easier for them?
So I think that one of the biggest things that is the cause of it is that you have lawyers in procurement that are negotiating the contract, and not the people that actually work on the business and informing them what it actually takes and what information they actually need in order to support the business. So things like, well, how many lines of businesses are we going to be supporting? How many campaigns are we going to be met? What is their budget? How many channels? How many platforms? In addition, know that with the platform, these are the different technology tools that we'll be using: ad verification, viewability, video versus. So running programmatic, everyone said, oh, programmatic, great. But trafficking video programmatic and trafficking display programmatic and native, 3 different things, 3 different sets of teams, some in most cases, right? Or 3 different individuals having to manage and optimize. And then you have analytics team and ops teams
Yes.
that actually have to support it. So they don't understand. So agencies need to map that out. Creative agencies do a much better job, and consulting agencies do a much better job at trying to manage clients and create change orders all the time, right? I was just talking to Renee, right?
Yeah. Renee on our team. We do change orders when clients say, oh yeah, that thing we paid you 75 grand for, we'd like you to do 12 more things. We're like, sure, great, but
yeah, hey, thanks for putting this media plan together, but we're gonna change the media mix. Can you redo the media plan? Sure. We don't say, well, we spent all this time to try and activate this campaign, and now you want to backpedal, or we actually activated it already, but now you want to backpedal. You need to pay us to make these changes.
Yeah. No, because again, as Steve knows, there was a culture of 15%, and you just did what you needed to do, and you knew that there was a little of that spirit where you had a different kind of relationship with your clients, and the things that you guys pulled off. I remember the story at the BBDO reunion. You talked about getting stuff live, and the miracles that you pulled with clients to do stuff with broadcasters was great.
Yeah, but and there's a difference. Print and TV, you have to wait months to get results back, right? So there's not this,
Historically.
real-time optimization, hands-on keyboard type of mentality.
Yeah, the infinity loop.
Yeah, and so when you tell clients, I remember when, initially started, we were charging quote unquote the 15%, but then we realized that at minimum it needed to be about 25%, but we were charging 10%.
Well, you need to do sometimes, but I want to bring this back, obviously, to what this means for CDPs, because they all have direct correlations, but I want to also tease out the fact that we're going to take anybody who's still standing and wants to have a beverage or more on us after. We'll take you out, happy hour, wherever we want to stumble. So we can continue any of this if you guys want, or obviously you'll have all our contact info. Classic getaway question though before we wrap up. So a year from now, what changes with CDPs? I think we've hit a little of this, but from your perspective, again, either for the brand, for the agency, or just ultimately for the consumer, what gets better a year from now, do you think, from what you've seen today and experienced using CDPs and trying to use them in other cases?
I think CDPs are going to definitely be more adopted than DMPs more quicker, especially given the fact that all this talk about privacy and CCPA and Chrome being a cookieless type of situation. All the different platforms that Chrome is one of the largest browsers that are being used, right? And so therefore, if a lot of these platform companies and other walled gardens want to continue in the space, they're going to need to help figure out how to work around the whole Chrome issue, right? And move into more of an addressable marketplace. I think you're going to see a lot of companies, especially agencies, really focus on building out their database of customers and audiences, and where they are going to be touting, hey, we have a lot of information across multiple data points, so therefore we can support any type of client. We can bring in offline and online data and match it. And I think that that is going to be, CDPs are then going to be even more useful. What I think is also interesting, you're seeing a lot of because of Google moving away from direct contracts with a lot of clients, right? They're pushing people into Google reseller. And a lot of these companies that are Google resellers are now Adobe resellers and Salesforce resellers. So they've already figured out, hey, there's something here and we need to be experts in all these three areas, as well as Amazon, most likely Walmart now.
Yeah.
But we need to be experts in all of this to then figure out how to actually participate in the ecosystem.
So you can circle the life of self to managed service, back to self, back to managed.
Question. What's your prediction on whether or not Universal NID will live up to its hype? And then will there ever be a third party non-black box attribution model?
I think the intentions of a universal ad ID is there. I think we've been talking about it for the last 3 years.
You're going to hear some different talk in 25 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I haven't been involved with the IAB and IAB Tech Lab the last 2 years, so I'm a little bit behind on where that stands. As far as the second question was,
will there ever be like a third party best practice attribution model that is not a convoluted black box?
so yes. And the reason why I say that is I feel like I've actually not solved it, but I've gotten close, right? And there's ways of, and most brands should know also that you should look at things where it's directional and it's not an as is thing. It's not flat, it's not linear. people behave in various different ways in various different environments with various different things. So you need to kind of formulate a way of looking at attribution where you got to use common sense as well. But if you take the approach of the way I did at Morgan Stanley was I took IDs from each of our platforms, so from Google, from various DSPs, and Adobe, and I matched key codes, right? Placement IDs, creative IDs, site IDs, all of that. And although I wasn't able to fully bring it together, I was able to show the overlap and the impact, right? So it was very obvious that when our media spend went up and our social engagements went up, our site activity went up. And when that completely went down, search was flat. And I was looking at all the different internal activities that we had, like email newsletters
Yeah,
and stuff.
that's
You
so-
see it.
On a macro aggregate, that's good to show that it still works, but being able to choose what was the cause and effect, instead of just, I saw 8 things in 6 digital, 2 traditional media, but then because I typed into a search box, they get credit.
Yeah, so when you look at when you're trying to optimize towards different channel mixes, to me, it's like we fall into this like, oh, social looks like it's doing really good and search is doing really good, display is not performing as well. I find that false, right? Because if you try and look at, again, there's tools out there, there's multi-attribution approaches in your ad server, in your site analytics platform. You're able to look at different models, but I still think that it's up to the org to figure out which model really fits in. If you're a company that is, has a long decision cycle, then you need to look at, multiple touch points and multiple channels and figure out the mix. Again, come up with concrete KPIs that you want to optimize towards, but at the same time, take into consideration the branding. And some intuition works in a lot of cases.
A little bit of good. Cool. Great stuff. We have gone a little over there, and we're going to intentionally, of course, cut our final segment here in about 2 minutes, maybe 2.5. Please join me in thanking Anthony. So, we only have 72 more slides. No, kidding. So this is the wrap-up portion. So, hey, Scott Bender, are you here? We got our prize to give out, right? Yeah. So we'll be back in Chicago with our team in a couple of weeks. So the person who traveled the furthest, I believe, was our friend from Chicago here, right? Nobody else traveled further than Chicago for this first one? Cool. So he's going to get his choice. Scott, who got the most points? I believe it was our friend over here, right? So choice of
in here first.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean multiple points awarded at different times throughout the day. So choice of umbrella, t-shirt, golf balls, or
Sure,
umbrella
umbrella.
above. Sure, there we go. Very nice. Well done. Thank you kindly. And then dealer's choice is us. So I think anytime someone voluntarily joins CDP University for the first time and is a lawyer, I think that's a special bonus here. So both remaining. Very good. Cool. So good stuff there. The last couple of things. So obviously, if you thought that, whoops, let me share again. Sorry, guys, on Zoom. So if you thought, of course, that 8 hours, if you say to yourself, geez, that 8 hours was great, but can I get more? So, if you don't know these places, slide change. Cha-ching. Thank you. These are some good places to go. So there's a nice one guy in Philadelphia with a friend who started the CDPI. He has a daily newsletter. It's 3 stories. It's a paragraph with a little comment and then press release. Nice. David does a nice job. Kind of starting to aggregate this. You will see almost every single day, someone's raising $20 million, someone's being sold for $200 million, or someone just integrated some system with another system daily. Chief Marketer is what we had referenced before with Scott Brinker and the crew there. That's the 8,000, their version of the 8,000 logos. Ad Exchanger, ExchangeWire, Digiday, three of our favorites, and then our friends at Media Post are also going to be certainly having sections that are related to this or talk about this on a daily basis. I think most of you guys are already there anyway. Final message. We've had the same reference for 7 years, and it's a movie that amazingly is now 21 years old in the Matrix. We don't expect anyone here or even ourselves to be able to be like Neo in the chair and put on the helmet and learn Kung Fu and then be in the dojo 8 seconds later and duking it out. So we know this takes a little bit of time, but we really appreciate the opportunity to help either start or continue your journey there. Battery's running low. I guess it's time to wrap it up. So with that, on behalf of our whole team at Brass Consulting, a special thanks to our friends at Adobe here, a special thanks to Angie, and obviously to all of you for joining us. Thank you. Thanks, everybody on Zoom.